Welcome back. So hopefully by now you have really calculated what your total debt repayments are, and you've identified how much of that repayment is going towards interest and how much is going towards paying down the capital. Now, if you did have any problems doing that, or if you did have any challenges doing that, don't worry, you're not alone. By now you will have received a free tool that I sent you in order to calculate that really easily. So it would be well worth just checking in your inbox after this video to find that tool, punch the numbers in and get a real idea of what damage a rise in interest rates can do. Having understood that, we can then have a look at the second I in iToxic, which is inflationary pressure. So what's inflationary pressure and how is it really damaging your ability to create wealth today and create lasting wealth for the future? So inflationary pressure is basically this. Intuitively, we know that the cost of living is going up, fuel is getting more expensive, it's rather more expensive to do the weekly food shop now than it has been ever before. And so we understand kind of in here that the cost of living is going up. Well, there is another inflationary pressure that is lurking in the background. It is invisible, it's odorless. It unfortunately is the inflationary pressure that the general public don't know about, and it's linked to money supply. Now, before we go into any of the detail, it's really worth noting that inflation is very much a double-edged poverty trap. You pay now and you pay later. So it's worth every household, every business owner, every entrepreneur really understanding how you are already suffering the consequences of inflation through increased food and fuel costs. The more damaging aspect of inflation is yet to come, and that is as the impact of increased money supply kicks in. And when that happens, there's some really damaging effects. So as an economist, I can get pretty geeky about money supply, but if you're not an economist, let me give you the quick kind of money supply 101. So essentially what happens is this: as governments require more money to maybe pay down their debts or bail failing banks out, for example, they go to the central bank and in essence demand that the central bank prints more notes. And so the central bank does that. It prints more notes. And so the government has more money to do what it wants to do with. Now, here's the thing. As with any store of value, when there is more of it in circulation, then of course it reduces in value. So I guess the easiest way to describe this is through an example. So for gold, for example, we all know that gold is a store of value. It's been going up incredible amounts over the last kind of 8-10 years, even more than that. Now, if you think of gold as a store of value, if it was easy to produce gold, so if, for example, you could print it out on one of these, whiz-bang 3D printers, or if it could just be conjured up out of thin air, much like the central banks are conjuring, new cash out of thin air, of course, it would have no value, would it? Gold would have no value at all. And that is, in essence, what the banks and the governments are doing to our money supply. Another example, if the property market is flooded with more houses due to the mass repossessions that we spoke about in the last video, well, of course, the value of each property on the market already goes down because the market is flooded. So as supply goes up, value goes down. And it's exactly the same with money supply. Now that has some very deep, lasting and quite dangerous consequences to your ability to create wealth, to maintain wealth, and really to grow wealth as the years draw on. It's no different with money supply. As more notes come into circulation, the value of each note already in circulation goes down. At the extreme, this results in what we call hyperinflation. And hyperinflation can have catastrophic consequences on households and indeed entire economies. As recently as 2009, the world got a really timely reminder of how quickly hyperinflation can take hold. So I mentioned earlier that as a social entrepreneur and an economic development advisor, my work takes me to Africa quite often. And I was in Zimbabwe between 2008 to 2009 advising government ministers. This was at the peak of their inflationary period. Now, inflation had risen so quickly in Zimbabwe that within the space of a year, so by the end of 2008, Zimbabwe was printing $100 billion notes, so a single note to the denomination of $100 billion, just so that the people there could buy the basics such as bread and water. And so when it happens very, very quickly indeed. Of course, the reason that the Zimbabwean government was printing more money is vastly different to the reason that our central banks are printing more money. However, the impact is exactly the same. Ultimately, more notes in circulation results in mass devaluation. And the consequence for homeowners, for households, for business owners, for entrepreneurs, for everyday people like you and I, is that every note we hold, every bit of money that we hold, in essence becomes worthless. There is, of course, the argument that says hyperinflation only really kicks in when the new money supply is brought into circulation. And that's absolutely true. The one thing that is stopping American, European and the British economy going into hyperinflation, the new money that's being printed is being held by the banks. So the banks are using it to shore up their cash reserves. But of course, banks only make money when they lend money. So when the bank lends money, it charges interest, and that's in essence how they make their money. So it doesn't really make sense for the banks to hold on to that money for longer than they need to. So we all know now that it's pretty difficult for business owners and homeowners and property investors to take out loans. But of course there will come a time when the banks need to make more money, and therefore that money comes into general circulation. And when that happens, that is when we will start to see the impact of hyperinflation. So what we need to do is to shore up our own cash reserves right now over the next 12, 18, 24 months in order that we can then really invest that into alternative stores of value. So what I'm going to do in the next video is really talk to you about exactly how you can do that. And it doesn't matter whether you're starting with €100, $100, £100, or indeed whether you've got a whole lot more. The system and the strategy that I'm going to share with you is going to allow you to take any sum of money that you have and start compounding that, start growing that, so that you can diversify your wealth portfolio and you can really start to investigate alternative sources of value storage. The important thing, of course, is that you need the cash coming in order to do that. So look, there's no homework for this video, but do check your inboxes for the calculator tool that I sent you, and also for a bunch of extra video resources that give you more of an explanation about hyperinflation. There's some examples there of how quickly hyperinflation sets in. I've also put in there photographs of the $100 billion notes that they were printing in Zimbabwe, and I'm sure you'll agree once you've seen it, it is quite incredible. So until the final video then, thank you.